They voted to leave my 8-year-old daughter at the airport. That's when I stopped being the family ATM and became their worst nightmare. I still remember the exact moment my phone lit up with that text message. 2 hours after Chloe's flight was supposed to take off, right in the middle of a board meeting where I was presenting quarterly projections to investors who controlled millions in funding. My mother's words appeared on the screen like a death sentence dressed up as a casual update. We all voted and decided the little one should stay behind. I read it 3 times. 4. 5. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. This had to be some kind of sick joke, the kind of twisted humor my family sometimes employed when they wanted to get under my skin. But even for them, this would be crossing a line so far into unforgivable territory that surely, they wouldn't. The meeting continued around me. Someone was asking about profit margins. Another voice chimed in about market expansion. I nodded mechanically, my mouth forming words I don't remember speaking, while my mind spiraled into a cold, dark place I didn't know existed inside me. My daughter, my baby. My Chloe, who had been so excited about this trip to Florida that she'd packed her suitcase a week early, who had carefully selected which stuffed animals could come along and settled on Mr. Hops, her favorite bunny with the floppy ears and button eyes that had seen her through every childhood fear and triumph. That morning felt like a lifetime ago now. I could still see Chloe's face, radiant with joy, her curls bouncing as she jumped up and down in our living room. She'd been wearing her favorite sundress, the yellow one with sunflowers that made her look like a ray of sunshine herself. I'd knelt down to her level, holding her small shoulders, trying to hide the gnawing anxiety that had been eating at me for days. Remember to listen to Grandma and Grandpa, okay, sweetheart? I'd said, smoothing down a rebellious curl. And if Aunt Tiffany asks you to do anything that doesn't feel right, you call me immediately. I will, Mommy, Chloe had promised, her gap-toothed smile breaking my heart with its innocence. We're going to see dolphins, and Uncle Mark said he'd teach me how to build a really big sandcastle. I'd watch them drive away, my mother at the wheel, my father in the passenger seat, and Tiffany's family packed in the back with Chloe sandwiched between their 2 boys. The last image I had was Chloe's small hand waving frantically through the rear window, Mr. Hops pressed against the glass beside her. That image haunted me now, mocking me with its normalcy. 2 hours before the flight, my mother had sent me a photo. Chloe at the airport, grinning at the camera, holding up Mr. Hops like a trophy. The text had been cheerful, almost aggressively so. Almost time to board. She's so excited, I'd replied with heart emojis, relief flooding through me that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong to worry. But I hadn't been wrong. I just underestimated how cruel my family could be. The meeting finally ended. I don't know how I made it through. Somehow my body had continued functioning while my mind was fracturing into 1,000 sharp pieces. I gathered my papers, smiled at the investors, shook hands, walked to my car in the parking garage like a normal person doing normal things. And then I was alone in my car, staring at that text message again, and the trembling started. I called my mother. My fingers were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to tap her contact information. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. Laughter. That's what I heard first. Not my mother's voice with some frantic explanation about a flight delay or a missed connection. Laughter. Multiple voices talking over each other. The unmistakable sound of luggage wheels on tile. The echoing acoustics of an airport terminal. They were there. They were at the airport. But Chloe wasn't with them. Mom? My voice came out strangled. Barely human. Oh, Ella, sweetie, didn't you get my text? My mother's tone was so casual it felt like a slap. Chloe was being absolutely impossible this morning. Throwing a tantrum, refusing to listen, being completely disrespectful. We all discussed it and decided she needed to learn a lesson about behavior. We're on our way to board now, but we thought it was best if she stayed home. You understand. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with the same tone she might use to tell me she'd decided to buy wheat bread instead of white. My vision tunneled. The parking garage spun around me. Where is she? I managed to force out through clenched teeth. Where did you leave my daughter? Well, we couldn't just abandon her at the airport, Ella. We're not monsters. That was Tiffany's voice now, cutting in with that particular edge of condescension she'd perfected over the years. We called an emergency childcare service. They sent someone to pick her up. Really, you're being so dramatic about this. The kid was acting like a complete brat. We're doing you a favor, actually, teaching her some discipline. You left my 8-year-old daughter with a stranger at an airport? Without asking me? Each word came out like a bullet, sharp and deadly. I could hear the venom in my own voice, could feel something fundamental shifting inside me, some final thread of familial obligation snapping under the weight of this betrayal. Oh, for God's sake, Ella, stop being so hysterical, Tiffany continued, and I could practically see her rolling her eyes, examining her manicured nails with that bored expression she wore whenever anyone dared to inconvenience her. The service is licensed and bonded or whatever. They do this kind of thing all the time. The woman seemed perfectly nice. She said she'd take Chloe to her house and you could pick her up whenever. We gave her your number. You should be thanking us for finding a solution instead of guilting us about wanting to enjoy our vacation. Our vacation. The vacation I'd paid for. Every single expense, from the flights to the beachfront resort to the rental car, all charged to my credit card because we're family, Ella, and you're doing so well financially. It's only right that you help out a little. A little. $4,500 for a week-long trip I wasn't even invited on. A trip they'd only agreed to take Chloe on after I'd begged, after I'd promised I'd cover all the costs, after I'd swallowed my pride and pleaded with my own mother to spend time with her granddaughter. The line went dead. They'd hung up on me. I sat there in my car, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence where my family's voices had been, and something inside me died. Or maybe something was born. I'm still not sure which. My hands were steady now as I scrolled through my recent messages, finding the one from my mother with the childcare service information. I dialed the number with mechanical precision, my mind shifting into a cold, calculating mode that felt foreign and familiar all at once. Bright Futures Emergency Childcare. A woman's voice, professional but tired. This is Ella Morrison. I believe you picked up my daughter, Chloe Morrison, from the airport approximately 2 hours ago. I need to know where she is. Now. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Yes, Miss Morrison. Chloe was picked up by one of our contracted caregivers, Sophia Martinez. Per protocol for emergency situations where parents aren't immediately available, she's taken the child to her registered residence to wait for parental pickup. I'm texting you the address now. The address appeared on my screen. I recognized the neighborhood. It was across town, in an area that had seen better days, probably 30 years ago. The kind of place where chain-link fences sagged under the weight of too many harsh winters, and hope went to die quietly behind drawn curtains. I started driving. The sky was already darkening, clouds rolling in with the promise of rain. Traffic was heavy, the evening rush hour clogging the highways with commuters desperate to get home to their families, to their safe, normal lives, where grandmothers didn't abandon grandchildren at airports. I laid on my horn at every red light, swerved around slower cars, ignored the angry gestures, and shouted curses from other drivers. Nothing mattered except getting to Chloe. Rain started falling as I exited the highway, fat drops that exploded against my windshield like tiny bombs. Within minutes it was a downpour, the kind of storm that turns the world into a blur of water and darkness. My wipers couldn't keep up. I could barely see the road ahead, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Every second Chloe spent in that stranger's house was another second of trauma, another moment of confusion and fear that I couldn't protect her from. The GPS led me deeper into the neighborhood, past corner stores with barred windows and apartment buildings tagged with graffiti. Finally, it announced my arrival in that cheerful, automated voice that felt obscene given the circumstances. I pulled up in front of a small house with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds. A single porch light flickered weakly, barely penetrating the storm-dark evening. I ran to the door, not bothering with an umbrella, rain soaking through my business suit within seconds. I pounded on the door hard enough to hurt my fist. Once, twice, 3 times. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, her face set in a permanent scowl, arms crossed over a stained t-shirt. "You the mother?" she demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "About damn time. That kid's been here all day. You people are unbelievable." I pushed past her without responding, my eyes frantically scanning the dim interior. And there she was, my baby. My Chloe, curled up on a threadbare sofa that smelled of cigarettes and disappointment, clutching Mr. Hops to her chest like a lifeline. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face blotchy and pale. The yellow sundress was wrinkled and stained. "Mommy!" The word came out as a wail, raw and broken. Chloe launched herself off the couch and ran to me, slamming into my legs with enough force to nearly knock me over. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around her, holding her so tight I was afraid I might hurt her, but I couldn't let go. I couldn't. Why didn't Grandma want me? Chloe sobbed into my shoulder. What did I do wrong? Why did they leave me? I was good, Mommy. I was being so good. I promise. Over Chloe's head, I looked at Sophia Martinez. The woman was still standing by the door, her scowl deepening. "Your family told me you'd be here in an hour," she said. "That was 6 hours ago. I had plans. I had things to do. You people don't care about anyone but yourselves." I wanted to scream at her, to explain that I wasn't like them, that I would never, but the words stuck in my throat because what was the point? To this woman, I was just another negligent parent, part of a system that treated children like inconvenient packages to be shuffled around. And technically, legally, I was responsible. I was the mother, the emergency contact, the one who should have been there. "How much do I owe you?" I asked, my voice flat. "The service charges $200 an hour, minimum 4 hours. And I had to feed her dinner. That's extra." I pulled out my wallet with one hand, the other still holding Chloe against me. I threw down $1,000 in cash, more than whatever inflated bill she was going to present. "Keep the change," I said. "And if anyone from my family ever contacts you again, tell them to go to hell." Sophia's eyes widened at the stack of bills, but she didn't say anything as I picked up Chloe, grabbed the small backpack that was sitting by the door, and carried my daughter out into the rain. Chloe fell asleep in the car on the drive home, exhausted from fear and crying. I kept reaching over to touch her, to make sure she was real, that she was safe, that I'd gotten to her in time. My mind was racing, skipping ahead to all the terrible things that could have happened, all the ways this day could have ended so much worse. A stranger's house, a bad neighborhood. 6 hours alone with someone she didn't know, in a place she'd never been, believing her own grandmother had abandoned her. By the time we got home, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still dark and heavy. I carried Chloe inside, tucked her into my bed because I couldn't bear to let her out of my sight, and sat beside her in the darkness, watching her sleep. That's when I opened my phone again. Read that text message again. "We all voted and decided the little one should stay behind." We all voted. As if my daughter were a democracy, a decision to be made by committee. As if she were an inconvenience they could just eliminate with a show of hands. My mother, my father, my sister Tiffany, her husband Mark, 4 adults who had looked at my excited, trusting 8-year-old daughter and decided she wasn't worth the trouble of a plane ticket they hadn't even paid for. I opened my banking app. Started scrolling through statements. 3 years of statements. And there it was, the financial record of my family's contempt for me, documented in black and white. Tiffany's rent. $1,800 a month for 36 months. I'd been paying it since she and Mark decided that traditional employment was beneath them, that they were entrepreneurs, that they just needed a little help while they got their online business off the ground. That business, as far as I could tell, consisted of posting inspirational quotes on social media and selling overpriced essential oils to their equally delusional friends. $64,800 for rent alone? Then there were the utilities, the car payments, the insurance, the grocery bills, the medical expenses, the credit card payments. Every time Tiffany's account got overdrawn, guess who got the call? Every time Mark's latest get-rich-quick scheme collapsed, guess who was expected to provide a soft landing? The numbers blurred together, an endless stream of transactions that all flowed one direction, out of my account and into their pockets. And beyond Tiffany and Mark, there were my parents. The retirement account I'd contributed to because "you're doing so well, Ella, and your father's pension isn't what we'd hoped," the new roof on their house, the kitchen remodel, the car repair. The vacation to Florida that should have been a beautiful memory for my daughter, but instead became the day I watched my family's true colors shine through in all their ugly glory. I grabbed my laptop, started a spreadsheet. Every transaction, carefully categorized and dated. Rent payments, utility bills, car payments, insurance, groceries, medical bills, credit card payments, student loans that somehow became my responsibility, emergency expenses that happened with suspicious regularity. That time, Tiffany needed $3,000 for dental work that apparently only the most expensive cosmetic dentist could perform. The $5,000 for Mark's business investment opportunity that evaporated within a month. The $2,000 for my parents' cruise because they'd sacrificed so much raising us and deserved a reward. The Florida trip expenses were particularly galling, $4,500 for the flights and resort, like I'd known about. But there were other charges I hadn't authorized. Room service at the resort, hundreds of dollars worth of cocktails and gourmet meals, all charged to my credit card. Spa treatments, shopping at the resort boutique. Excursions I'd never agreed to pay for. My family had turned this trip into their own personal spending spree, using my credit card like an unlimited gift certificate. And then there was the emergency childcare bill, $1,200 to abandon my daughter with a stranger. By the time I finished, the sun was starting to rise and my spreadsheet had one final, damning number at the bottom, $78,847.32, nearly $80,000 over 3 years. More than a year of my post-tax salary, handed over to people who had just voted to leave my child at an airport. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too hot, too chaotic. What I felt now was cold and clear and absolutely unforgiving. This wasn't about the money. Not really. Money could be earned back. But what they'd done to Chloe, the trauma they'd inflicted, the trust they'd shattered, that was unforgivable. And they needed to understand that. They needed to feel consequences for once in their entitled, parasitic lives. I picked up my phone and searched for a name I'd heard thrown around in the legal circles of my industry. Samuel Kingston. The attorney who made corporate executives sweat during depositions. The man who'd successfully sued a Fortune 500 company for $40 million in damages and walked away with a reputation as the most ruthlessly effective litigator in the state. His rates were astronomical, his methods were cutthroat, and his success rate was legendary. I called his office the moment it opened. Got transferred 3 times before reaching someone who could actually schedule a consultation. Apparently, Mr. Kingston was very selective about his clients. I didn't care. I explained my situation in terse, clinical terms to a paralegal who sounded increasingly interested as I talked. By the end of the call, I had an appointment for that afternoon. Samuel Kingston's office was everything I'd expected. Sleek, modern, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Abstract art that probably cost more than my car hung on walls painted in shades of gray that screamed wealth and power. The man himself was in his 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that I recognized as Italian and custom-tailored. He listened to my story without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and studied me with an intensity that made me feel like I was being dissected and cataloged. "You want to sue your family," he said. "It wasn't a question. I want them to pay back every cent they owe me, with interest. I want a legally binding agreement that they can never ask me for money again. And I want them to understand that they can't treat people, especially a child, like disposable commodities without consequences." A smile played at the corner of Kingston's mouth. "You've documented everything?" I pushed the flash drive across his desk. Every transaction, bank statements, credit card bills, text messages, emails asking for money, screenshots of payment confirmations. 3 years of financial records, plus the documentation from the emergency childcare service, the text messages from my mother about leaving Chloe. Everything. He plugged the flash drive into his computer, and I watched his eyebrows rise as he scrolled through my meticulously organized files. After several minutes, he looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "This is excellent work," he said. "Very thorough. You have a clear case for restitution. The abandonment of your daughter adds an emotional element that would play very well in court if it came to that, though I doubt it will. Most people fold when faced with the reality of legal action and public exposure." He named his retainer fee. It was substantial. I didn't hesitate. "When can you start?" "Immediately. I'll have a demand letter drafted by end of business today. It will detail every transaction, the total amount owed, and give them 10 business days to respond with a payment plan or face litigation. I'll also note the circumstances of your daughter's abandonment, not as a legal claim, but as context for the breakdown of familial relations. Sometimes the threat of public exposure is more effective than any lawsuit." After I left, I sat in my car looking at Chloe's school picture that I kept on my dashboard. That gap-toothed grin, those bright eyes full of trust and innocence. Eyes that had cried for 6 hours in a stranger's house, wondering why her family didn't want her. "This is for you, baby," I whispered. "So you never have to wonder if you're worth fighting for." The demand letter arrived in my family's email inboxes the next morning at exactly 8 a.m. I'd read Kingston's draft the night before. It was a masterpiece of legal intimidation wrapped in professional language. Every transaction was listed, every dollar accounted for. The total amount demanded, $78,847.32 in principal, plus $15,769.46 in interest, calculated at a generous 5% annually, for a grand total of $94,616.78. And there, in a separate paragraph near the end, the words that I knew would cut deeper than any dollar amount. It should be noted that this demand for repayment follows an incident in which the parties jointly decided to abandon Miss Morrison's 8-year-old daughter at an airport, subsequently placing the child with an unlicensed emergency caregiver in an unsafe neighborhood for over 6 hours. While this does not constitute a separate legal claim at this time, it provides important context for the complete breakdown of familial trust and obligation. My phone started ringing within 30 minutes. I let every call go to voicemail. 15 calls from my mother, 8 from my father, 23 from Tiffany. Even Mark called, which was unprecedented since he'd never initiated contact with me in his life. The voicemails ranged from confused, to angry, to threatening, to pleading. I didn't listen to any of them in full, just enough to confirm they'd all received the letter and were, as Kingston had predicted, panicking. At noon, my phone rang with a video call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost declined, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. There they were, all 4 of them, gathered around a phone screen propped up on what looked like a poolside table at the resort. My mother's face filled most of the screen, but I could see my father behind her, and Tiffany and Mark on either side. They all had drinks with little umbrellas. They were wearing resort bathrobes. They looked like people who didn't have a care in the world, except for the tension around their eyes and the way my mother's mouth was pressed into a thin line. "Ella, what the hell is this?" my mother demanded without preamble. "Are you seriously trying to extort your own family?" "Extortion would be demanding money you don't owe," I replied calmly. "This is requesting repayment of documented loans and expenses. There's a significant legal difference." "Loans?" Tiffany's voice was shrill, her face pushing into the frame. "You never said these were loans. You offered to help. Family helps family, Ella. Or did you forget that the moment you got successful? God, you've changed. You've become so cold. So selfish." I laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so bitter it surprised even me. "Selfish? You voted to leave my daughter at an airport, Tiffany. You abandoned an 8-year-old child because she was inconveniencing your vacation, a vacation I paid for, and I'm selfish for asking you to pay me back? Oh, for Christ's sake, the kid is fine, Mark chimed in, taking a sip of his tropical drink. You're being so dramatic. We made sure she was safe. It's not like we just left her alone. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Really? Then you won't mind if I share the details of exactly what you did with everyone we know. Your friends, your neighbors, your parents, everyone on your social media. I'm sure they'll all agree that abandoning a child at an airport is totally reasonable. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the color drain from Tiffany's face. You wouldn't, my mother finally said, but her voice wavered. Try me. You have 10 business days to respond to the demand letter with a payment plan. If I don't receive a satisfactory response, my attorney will file a lawsuit, and all of this becomes public record. And yes, Mother, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what happened. The country club set you're so desperate to impress, they'll know. Your church community, they'll know. Every single person you've ever tried to maintain appearances in front of will know that you're the kind of people who abandon children. This is insane, my father exploded, his face appearing over my mother's shoulder. You're going to destroy this family over money? You destroyed this family when you decided my daughter wasn't worth the inconvenience of a plane ride. My voice rose despite my best efforts to stay calm. You destroyed it every single time you took my money and my help and treated me like an ATM that existed solely for your convenience. You destroyed it with every snide comment, every guilt trip, every manipulation. I just refuse to pretend anymore that this family was something it hasn't been for a very long time. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding my system, but underneath the physical reaction was a core of absolute certainty. I was done. Done pretending. Done sacrificing. Done being the family's emotional and financial safety net while getting nothing but contempt in return. That evening, Chloe was sitting at the kitchen table drawing while I made dinner. I glanced over and saw she'd drawn a picture of a bunny wearing sunglasses, holding a suitcase, its ears perked up like it was waving goodbye. What's Mr. Hops doing in your picture, sweetheart? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Chloe looked up at me with those serious eyes that seemed far too old for an 8-year-old. He's going somewhere better, Mommy, somewhere where nobody votes to leave him behind. My heart broke and healed at the same time. I knelt down beside her chair and pulled her into a hug. You're right, baby. Mr. Hops is very smart. And you know what? So are we. We're going somewhere better, too. Where? She asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Anywhere that's not with people who don't see how special you are. The next few days were a masterclass in family dysfunction. My phone never stopped ringing. When I blocked their numbers, they started calling from other phones. When I blocked those, they started showing up. First, it was my mother, appearing at my office building. Security escorted her out after she caused a scene in the lobby, sobbing and wailing about ungrateful daughters who turned on their families. Then it was Tiffany and Mark, camping out on my doorstep one morning, demanding I let them in so we could talk like adults. I called the police. Watched from my window as 2 officers informed them they were trespassing and needed to leave. The look on Tiffany's face was almost worth 3 years of financial abuse. My father tried a different tactic. He sent emails. Long, rambling messages about family loyalty and how disappointed he was in me, how I'd been raised better than this, how money wasn't everything. I forwarded them to Kingston without reading past the first paragraph. On day 5, Tiffany posted a photo on social media. It was a selfie of her holding a fruity cocktail, wearing designer sunglasses I'd probably paid for, with a caption that read, "Remember when family meant something? Money changes people. So grateful to still have love in my life." The post got dozens of sympathetic comments from people who had no idea what had actually happened, all of them agreeing that yes, money changes people, and family should come first. My mother commented, "So proud of you for maintaining your grace and dignity during difficult times. Some people don't understand that family is forever, but we know the truth." I forwarded the screenshots to Kingston. He called me an hour later. "This is actually helpful," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. They're creating a public narrative that directly contradicts the facts. If this goes to court, their social media posts will be Exhibit A for bad faith. But I don't think we'll need to go that far. I'm going to send them a second letter, specifically addressing these posts and noting that public defamation won't be tolerated. They'll delete everything within hours, I guarantee it. He was right. By that evening, Tiffany's post was gone. So was my mother's comment. In their place was a new post from Tiffany, this one carefully neutral. Taking time to reflect on family relationships and the importance of clear communication. The comments on that post were confused and sparse. On day 8, Kingston called again. "They want to meet, your mother and Tiffany. They're requesting a mediated discussion about the demand." No mediation. Either they pay or we sue. Those are the only 2 options. I told them as much, but they're insistent. They claim they want to explain their side, that there's been a misunderstanding, the usual tactics. Should I tell them negotiations are only possible through me? Tell them they have 2 more days to send a payment plan. After that, we file. There was a pause. You know, most of my clients aren't this decisive. Usually there's some wavering, some guilt, some last-minute doubt. You're absolutely certain about this? I thought about Chloe, about the nightmares she'd been having, about how she'd started crying every time someone mentioned airports or vacations. I thought about the therapy bills I'd already started accumulating, the conversations I'd had with a child psychologist about abandonment, trauma, and trust issues. I thought about 3 years of being treated like a resource instead of a person. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I said. On day 9, Kingston received a response. Not a payment plan, a counteroffer. They would pay back the principal amount, $78,847.32, but not the interest. They would pay in installments over 5 years. And in exchange, I would sign a document agreeing never to discuss the airport incident publicly or pursue any additional claims. It's insulting, Kingston said when he called to inform me. They're trying to minimize their obligation and silence you at the same time. Should I reject it outright? Counteroffer. Full amount including interest, payable over 3 years, first payment of $20,000 due within 30 days. And I will agree not to pursue additional legal claims, but I won't sign away my right to discuss what happened to my daughter. That's non-negotiable. If they don't like it, we'll see them in court, where everything becomes public record anyway. I'll send it now. The response came back within an hour. Rejected. They claimed they couldn't possibly pay $20,000 in 30 days. Their finances were stretched thin. I was being unreasonable. File the lawsuit, I told Kingston. Are you sure? Once we file, this becomes public. Your family relationships will be permanently damaged. They damaged them when they abandoned my daughter. I'm just making sure there are consequences. File it. The lawsuit was filed on day 10. Civil action seeking restitution for loans and financial support provided to family members, with detailed accounting of all transactions. Because of the amount involved and the nature of the claims, it was newsworthy enough that a local legal blog picked up the story. No names were used in the blog post, but in my relatively small city, it wouldn't take long for people to connect the dots. My phone exploded. Not with calls from my family this time, but from relatives and family friends who'd seen the blog post or heard the gossip. Most of them were angry with me. How dare I air family business publicly? How dare I sue my own flesh and blood? Didn't I know that families were supposed to work things out privately? I was being vindictive, petty, cruel. One cousin sent me a message that simply said, "You're dead to this family." I didn't respond to any of them, but Kingston responded to their attorneys. Yes, this was a serious legal action. No, we were not interested in dropping it. Yes, we had extensive documentation. No, we would not be intimidated by public pressure or family drama. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, my mother showed up at my house, not with the police this time, but at 7 in the morning, before I'd left for work. I'd been getting Chloe ready for school when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there, alone, looking older than I'd ever seen her look. For a moment, I almost opened the door, almost let her in, almost gave her a chance to explain or apologize or do whatever she'd come to do. Then I remembered Chloe's face in that stranger's living room, the way she'd asked what she'd done wrong, the nightmares. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. "What do you want?" "Ella, please, can we talk just for a few minutes, mother to mother?" "We can talk through attorneys, that's what they're for." "This is insane. You're going to destroy our family's reputation, our relationships, everything we've built, over money? Over one mistake?" "One mistake?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "You think this is about one mistake? This is about 3 years of treating me like an ATM. This is about taking advantage of my success and my generosity and never once saying thank you or showing appreciation. This is about choosing Tiffany over me at every single turn, from the time we were kids. Remember when we were little and she drew all over the living room wall with permanent markers? Who got punished? I did, because you said I should have been watching her. When she crashed your car when she was 17? I was the one who had to give up my college savings to help pay for the repairs, because Tiffany has her whole life ahead of her, and this mistake shouldn't ruin it. Every time she screwed up, I was expected to fix it or suffer for it. And I did, because I was the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice without complaint. But you know what the final mistake was? Abandoning my child. Your grandchild. That's not a mistake, Mother. That's a choice. A deliberate, cruel choice that revealed exactly what you all think of me and Chloe. We're inconveniences, resources to be used and discarded when we're no longer convenient. My mother's face crumpled. It wasn't like that. We just thought Chloe needed discipline. She was acting out, being difficult. We thought we were helping you by teaching her a lesson. By leaving her with a stranger, in a bad neighborhood, for 6 hours? That's not discipline, that's abuse, that's trauma. Do you know she's having nightmares? Do you know she asks me every single day if I'm going to leave her somewhere? An 8-year-old child shouldn't have to worry that the people who are supposed to love her might abandon her at any moment. You did that to her. Not me. You. Ella, please. Tears were streaming down her face now. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We made a terrible mistake. But this lawsuit, this public humiliation, it's destroying us. Your father's friends at the club are asking questions. People at church are treating us differently. Tiffany can't show her face anywhere without people whispering. Is this really what you want? To destroy your own family? You destroyed this family. I'm just making sure you pay for it. Now get off my property before I call the police. I closed the door in her face, heard her sobbing on the other side, felt absolutely nothing except a cold satisfaction. Chloe appeared in the hallway, still in her pajamas, holding Mr. Hops. Was that Grandma? She asked quietly. Yes, baby. Is she going to say sorry for leaving me? I knelt down, pulled Chloe into my arms. Some people don't know how to apologize, sweetheart, but that's okay. We don't need their apologies. We just need to take care of each other. Chloe nodded against my shoulder. Okay, Mommy. Can Mr. Hops have extra pancakes for breakfast? He was very brave when he was left behind, so he deserves a treat. Mr. Hops can have all the pancakes he wants, I promised, my heart breaking and healing simultaneously. 2 weeks later, Kingston called with news. They've agreed to settle. Full amount plus interest, payable over 3 years, first payment of $25,000 due within 14 days. They've also agreed to all terms including no further financial requests and your right to discuss the circumstances that led to this situation. They're not happy about it, but their attorney made it clear that going to trial would be far more expensive and far more publicly damaging. Get it in writing, notarized, make it ironclad. Already done. Documents are being signed as we speak. Congratulations, Miss Morrison. You've won. But I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt hollow, exhausted, drained of everything except a grim determination to see this through to the end. Winning would have been having a family that loved and respected me. This was just justice, cold and impersonal and necessary. The first payment arrived exactly on time, 14 days later. $25,000, wire transferred into my account. I stared at the transaction notification on my phone for a long time. This should have felt satisfying. Instead, it just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that money was the only language my family understood. Sad that Chloe would grow up knowing her grandmother chose a vacation over her. But beneath the sadness was something harder and more enduring. Resolve. I wasn't going to let them off easy. I wasn't going to make this comfortable or convenient. They were going to feel the weight of their choices for the next 3 years, every single monthly payment a reminder of what they'd done and what they'd lost. I also wasn't done. The settlement covered the money, but it didn't address the deeper damage. And I was uniquely positioned to make sure that damage had lasting consequences. I'd been in my industry long enough to have connections, friends in unexpected places. One of those friends was Marcus Chen, an investigative journalist who specialized in financial fraud and white-collar crime. We'd met at a conference years ago and stayed in touch, the kind of professional friendship that exists primarily over occasional coffee meetings and LinkedIn endorsements. I called him. Asked if he'd be interested in doing some freelance research for me. Nothing illegal, just information gathering. Public records, social media deep dives, financial background checks on people I had legitimate reason to investigate. He was intrigued, especially when I offered to pay his full daily rate. Marcus worked fast. Within a week, I had a comprehensive report on Tiffany and Mark's financial situation, and it was even worse than I'd imagined. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans from predatory lenders. Their online business had generated exactly $347 in revenue over 2 years. Mark's freelance consulting was non-existent. They'd been living entirely off the money I provided, plus what they could extract from my parents, who themselves were in shakier financial condition than they let on. But the most interesting discovery was about an investment scheme my father had gotten involved in, with Tiffany's encouragement, some cryptocurrency opportunity that promised ridiculous returns. He'd put in $50,000 of his retirement savings. The investment was, predictably, garbage. The company behind it was currently under investigation for fraud. I sat on that information for a while, thinking about what to do with it. I could warn them. The old Ella would have warned them, would have tried to protect them from their own stupidity. But I wasn't the old Ella anymore. Instead, I made a few phone calls to people I knew in financial regulatory circles. Asked some careful questions about the investigation, about the timeline, about when the hammer was likely to fall. Then I waited. The investment collapsed 3 months after the settlement was finalized. My father lost everything he'd put in. The news devastated them, according to the family gossip that still filtered to me through distant cousins who hadn't completely cut me off. They were talking about selling their house, downsizing, cutting back on everything. The country club membership was the first thing to go. I felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt. Might have been. But then I remembered Chloe's face in that stranger's living room, and the feeling passed. Around the same time, Tiffany's landlord contacted me. The house she'd been renting, the one I'd been paying for, was being sold. Tiffany had approached the landlord about buying it, apparently unaware that I was the one who'd been paying her rent all along. The landlord, who'd had my contact information for years as the actual payer, called me instead. "Miss Morrison, I wanted to check with you before I told your sister that you're the one who's been covering her rent. She seems to be under the impression she was paying it herself. I don't want to cause family drama, but I thought you should know." "Please tell her," I said. "In fact, I'd appreciate it if you could provide her with copies of all the rent payment records, showing exactly where the money came from." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely positive." The explosion that followed was spectacular. Tiffany called me screaming, so incoherent with rage that I could barely understand half of what she was saying. Something about betrayal, about humiliation, about how dare I make her look stupid in front of her landlord. I let her rant until she ran out of breath. "Are you done?" I asked calmly. "How could you? How could you not tell me you were paying my rent? Do you know how embarrassing this is? More embarrassing than abandoning an 8-year-old at an airport? I doubt it. But here's the thing, Tiffany. You're going to need to find a new place to live. And a job to pay for it. I'm done being your safety net. You're 42 years old. It's time to act like it." "You can't do this. We have kids. We'll be homeless." "You have 3 months before the house sells. That's plenty of time to figure something out. Maybe try actual employment instead of pretending to be an entrepreneur. I hear McDonald's is hiring." I hung up, blocked her number, felt absolutely nothing. But I wasn't finished. I'd been thinking about the social media posts, the way my family had tried to paint me as the villain in all of this. They'd deleted the most egregious posts, but the narrative they'd tried to create still lingered in certain circles. Time to correct the record. I'd been documenting everything, of course. Screenshots of every post, every comment, every attempt to publicly shame me while privately begging for money. I'd saved every email, every text message, every voicemail. I had a comprehensive record of their behavior. I created a new document, a timeline of events with supporting evidence. Nothing identifying, no names, but anyone who knew us would recognize the story. I titled it "The Cost of Family, a Case Study in Financial and Emotional Abuse." I posted it on Medium under a pseudonym, formatted it perfectly, made it compelling and readable. The post went viral within a week. Thousands of people shared it, commented on it, discussed it in parenting forums and personal finance communities and relationship advice threads. People were outraged on my behalf. They shared their own stories of family members who used them, who took advantage of kindness, who treated loved ones like ATMs. The consensus was overwhelming. I was right to cut them off, right to demand repayment, right to protect my daughter. And because the internet is terrible at keeping secrets, someone eventually connected the dots and figured out who I was. My name started appearing in comments. Then my family's names. The story spread through my city like wildfire. Everyone knew. Everyone was talking about it. My mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of curiosity. "You've ruined us," she said, her voice shaking. "Do you understand that? No one will talk to us. We can't go anywhere without people staring. Your father had to resign from the club board. I was uninvited from 3 charity committees. Tiffany and Mark can't find work because employers Google their names and find articles about them abandoning a child. You've destroyed our entire lives over your need for revenge." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed your own lives by treating people like garbage and assuming there would never be consequences. I just made sure those consequences actually happened. You taught me a valuable lesson, Mother. You taught me that family will hurt you worse than enemies ever could, that the people who claim to love you will use that love as a weapon. That kindness is seen as weakness and generosity as obligation, so thank you for that lesson. It was expensive, but apparently I needed to learn it. Ella, please, we're sorry. We're truly, genuinely sorry. What do we have to do to make this right?" "There is no making this right. There's just living with what you've done. Like I'm living with the memory of my daughter's face when I found her in that stranger's house. Like Chloe is living with the nightmares and the trust issues and the therapy bills. You get to live with the social consequences of your choices. That seems fair to me." I hung up. This time, I felt something. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of balance. Of the scales finally being even. The monthly payments continued like clockwork. $2,700, transferred on the 1st of every month. I set up an automatic investment plan, putting every cent into Chloe's college fund. In a way, my family was finally doing what they should have been doing all along, investing in Chloe's future. Life gradually normalized, or at least found a new normal. Chloe's nightmares became less frequent. She was thriving in therapy, learning healthy coping mechanisms, working through her trauma. She was making new friends at school, joining activities, smiling more. Mr. Hops was still her constant companion, but now he represented resilience rather than trauma. We moved. Got a new house in a better neighborhood, closer to Chloe's school. A fresh start. I changed our phone numbers, made our social media accounts private. drew clear boundaries around our lives, and defended them fiercely. I also changed jobs, taking a position at a larger company with better benefits and more opportunities for advancement. The salary increase was substantial. I was finally able to save money, instead of funneling it into the black hole of my family's dysfunction. 6 months after the settlement, I ran into Tiffany at a grocery store. She looked terrible. Exhausted, older, wearing discount store clothes instead of the designer brands she used to covet. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. For a second, I thought she might cause a scene, but she just turned and hurried away, abandoning her half-full cart in the middle of the aisle. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For them to struggle, to understand what it felt like to have to work for everything, to not have a safety net. But seeing it in person was different than imagining it. It was real and human and messy in ways that spreadsheets and settlement agreements could never be. But then I thought about Chloe, about how she'd asked me just that morning if I was sure I wasn't going to leave her at school and not come back. About how an 8-year-old shouldn't have to worry about abandonment, and the sadness evaporated. They deserved this. They'd earned it. A year into the 3-year payment plan, Marcus called me with interesting information. He'd been keeping tabs on my family out of professional curiosity, and he'd discovered that Mark had finally gotten a job. A real job, with a salary and benefits and everything. The catch? It was a delivery driver position, minimum wage plus tips, brutal hours. Tiffany had found work too, as a receptionist at a dental office. Both of them were working 40-plus hours a week, barely making ends meet even with both incomes. They're living in a 2-bedroom apartment in that complex off Henderson Street. Marcus told me. You know the one, with the reputation for bedbugs and break-ins. Their car got repossessed last month. Mark's using a bicycle to make deliveries. Your parents are in an assisted living community now, one of the budget ones. Your dad's Social Security and your mom's pension barely cover it. None of them can afford to miss a single payment to you. Good, I said, and I meant it, but Marcus wasn't done. There's something else. Tiffany's been putting out feelers, trying to borrow money from distant relatives. She's spinning this story about how you've financially ruined them, how they're struggling to survive, how they need help just to keep food on the table. Some people are buying it. Your Aunt Linda sent her $2,000 last month. That was interesting, and potentially problematic. Is she using that money to make the settlement payments? I don't think so. The payments are coming from a joint account that Mark's paychecks go into. The money from your aunt went into a different account, a personal one under Tiffany's name only. So she's scamming relatives while claiming poverty. That's very on brand for her. I thought for a moment. Can you get me documentation? Bank statements, the messages she sent to Aunt Linda, anything that shows the money flow? Probably. Why? Because if she's defrauding people to avoid the consequences of her own actions, that's something they should know about. And if she's hiding money while claiming she can barely afford the settlement payments, that's something my attorney should know about. Marcus delivered the documentation within a week. It was damning. Tiffany had approached at least 5 different relatives with sob stories about medical bills and eviction notices and starving children. She'd collected over $12,000 in total, and none of it had gone toward legitimate expenses. Instead, she'd spent it on online shopping, restaurant meals, a weekend trip to a casino. I forwarded everything to Kingston. He called me immediately. This is fraud, he said bluntly. She's violated the terms of the settlement agreement, which stipulated full financial transparency. We could go back to court, demand immediate payment in full, possibly even file criminal fraud charges. What do you recommend? That depends on what you want. Do you want them punished further, or do you just want your money? I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I want to drag this out further? 'Cause more damage? Or was I satisfied with what I'd already accomplished? Send them a warning. I finally decided. Let them know we're aware of the fraud, that we have documentation, and that if they continue trying to scam people or violate the terms of the settlement, we'll take legal action. But don't file anything yet. Give them a chance to stop digging their hole deeper. You're being generous. I'm being strategic. Right now, they're making their payments and living with the consequences. If we push harder, they might declare bankruptcy, and I'll never see the rest of the money. Better to keep them scared and compliant than to push them into a corner where they have nothing left to lose. The warning letter was sent. The scamming stopped, at least as far as Marcus could determine. The payments continued. Life went on. Chloe turned 9, then 10. The nightmares stopped completely around her 10th birthday. She was happy, well-adjusted, doing great in school. She'd started taking art classes and discovered a talent for painting. Her therapist said she was one of the most resilient kids she'd ever worked with. You did that, the therapist told me during one of our periodic updates. You protected her. You showed her that actions have consequences, that she doesn't have to accept mistreatment, that she's worth fighting for. Those are incredibly valuable lessons. I just didn't want her to grow up thinking family could hurt her without repercussions. I said, mission accomplished. She knows she's safe with you. She knows you'll always choose her. That's what matters. The settlement payments ended on schedule, 36 months after they began. The final payment came through on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee when the notification appeared on my phone. $94,616.78, paid in full. I should have felt something. Relief, satisfaction, closure. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of carrying this anger, this hurt, this need for them to understand what they'd done. The money didn't change anything. It didn't give Chloe back her innocence. It didn't repair the broken trust. It just balanced a ledger. But maybe that was enough. Maybe justice didn't have to feel satisfying. Maybe it just had to be done. That weekend, Chloe and I went to an art supply store. She'd been talking about wanting to try oil paints, so I told her to pick out whatever she wanted. No budget, no limits. Her eyes lit up in that way that reminded me why I'd done all of this in the first place. While she was debating between different brush sets, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ella? It was my mother's voice, old and tired. I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand that. But I needed to tell you something. Your father passed away last night, heart attack. He went peacefully in his sleep. I felt nothing, just a blank emptiness where grief should have been. I'm sorry to hear that, I said automatically. The funeral is on Thursday. I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you consider coming? And bringing Chloe? He would have wanted to see her one more time. He voted to abandon her at an airport, I said flatly. He doesn't get to see her now. Please, Ella. I know we can't fix what we broke. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but he was still your father, and Chloe's grandfather. Biology doesn't entitle anyone to a relationship, I said. He made his choices. So did you. And one of those choices was deciding that a vacation was more important than your granddaughter's well-being. So no, we won't be coming to the funeral, but I'll send flowers. That's the most I can offer. I hung up. Chloe appeared beside me with an armful of art supplies, practically glowing with excitement. Mommy, look at all the colors. Can we really get all of these? We can get anything you want, baby, I told her, pulling her into a hug. Anything at all. That night, after Chloe was asleep, I sat in my home office and looked at the spreadsheet I'd maintained for 3 years. Every payment, every deadline, every transaction, all color-coded and organized. I'd spent so much time on this, so much energy, and now it was over. I created a new spreadsheet. This one was for Chloe's future. College funds, art classes, summer camps, travel, experiences and opportunities, and all the things I wanted to give her. All the things a child should have when they're loved and valued and protected. This is what mattered now. Not revenge, not justice, not making sure my family understood the consequences of their actions. Just building a good life for my daughter. A life where she knew she was wanted, where she never had to question her worth, where family meant support instead of exploitation. The following Thursday, the day of my father's funeral, Chloe and I went to the zoo instead. She'd been asking to go for weeks, and I'd kept putting it off because of work. But that day felt like the right time. We spent hours watching the animals, eating overpriced ice cream, laughing at the otters' antics. Chloe took photos with her kid's camera, already showing the artistic eye she was developing. At one point, we stopped by the bunny exhibit. Chloe stood at the railing, watching the rabbits hop around their enclosure. Mr. Hops would like it here, she said thoughtfully. It's safe and nobody can vote to leave them behind. No one's ever going to vote to leave you behind again, I promised. I'll make sure of that. She looked up at me with those serious eyes. I know, Mommy. You're the best at protecting me, even when it's hard. We left the zoo as the sun was setting, Chloe chattering about her favorite animals, her mind already planning what she wanted to paint when we got home. I drove through the city as the lights came on, past the neighborhood where I'd grown up, past the street where my parents lived, past all the places that used to define my world. And I felt free. Finally, completely free. The years that followed were good ones. Chloe thrived, I thrived. We built a life full of art and laughter and trust. We made new traditions, new memories, new definitions of what family could mean. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose, the family that chooses you back. I occasionally heard updates about Tiffany and Mark through the grapevine. They were still struggling, still working menial jobs, still living paycheck to paycheck. My mother had moved into subsidized senior housing after my father's death, her country club friends a distant memory. The life of appearances and pretense they'd valued so much had collapsed completely. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles anymore, no vindication, just a quiet acknowledgement that this was the natural consequence of their choices. They'd built their lives on exploitation and entitlement, and those foundations had proven unstable. That wasn't my doing. That was just gravity. On Chloe's 13th birthday, she asked me something I'd been expecting but dreading. Mom, do you ever think about your family? Like, do you miss them? We were frosting her birthday cake together, her friends due to arrive in an hour. I took my time answering, choosing my words carefully. I miss the family I wish they were, I finally said. I miss the idea of having parents who loved me unconditionally, a sister who was actually a friend, a support system that didn't come with strings attached. But the actual people? No. I don't miss them. They showed me who they really were, and I believed them. Do you think they ever think about what they did? To us? Maybe. Probably. But thinking about it isn't the same as understanding it or changing. Some people are just wired to take from others. They can't help it, or maybe they won't help it. Either way, it's not something I can fix or change. All I could do was stop letting them take from me. Chloe nodded, considering this. I'm glad you stopped. I'm glad we don't see them anymore. Me too, baby, me too. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first party guest. Chloe ran to answer it, 13 years old and bright and beautiful and unbroken. Despite everything, unbroken. And that, more than any settlement payment or legal victory or social consequences, was the real win. That night, after the party was over and Chloe was asleep, I went up to her room to check on her one last time. She'd stuck her latest painting above her desk, a watercolor of a bunny with sunglasses standing on a mountaintop, looking out over a vast, colorful landscape. The bunny was smiling. I stood there for a long time, looking at that painting, thinking about everything we'd been through and everything we'd overcome. The airport, the lawsuit, the settlement. The slow, steady rebuilding of our lives. The woman I'd become in the process, harder maybe, but also stronger, more sure of my worth, more willing to defend it. My family had taught me that love without respect is worthless, that obligation without reciprocity is exploitation, that forgiveness without consequences is just enabling. Those were harsh lessons, expensive lessons, painful lessons, but they were lessons I needed to learn, and lessons I was grateful to pass on to Chloe in a healthier way. We didn't need them. We never had. We just needed each other and the courage to walk away from people who didn't value us. And we'd done it. We'd walked away. We'd survived. We'd thrived. That was enough. That was everything. I turned off Chloe's light and went downstairs to my own room, where a new spreadsheet waited on my laptop. This one was for our next adventure, a summer trip to Europe, just the two of us. Art museums in Paris, canals in Venice, castles in Scotland. All the things my family's demands had prevented me from doing for years. No more. Those days were over. The debt was paid, the scores were settled, the bridges were burned. All that was left was the future, bright and open and entirely ours. I smiled as I started planning our itinerary. Mr. Hops would definitely need a passport.